Alright guys, so we kind of talked about the intro to the Cold War in the last video, and we're going to talk about kind of one of those proxy wars that we talked about, okay? So remember, the United States policy at this point is going to be containment. We want to stop the spread of communism. Unfortunately, the Soviet Union, okay, wants to spread communism everywhere, okay? So at the end of the 1940s, roughly 1949, the communist leader Mao Zedong takes control of China. Okay, so we already talked about communism consuming Eastern Europe, and now we see it spreading into other countries. Okay, we'll talk about this several times, but the U.S. becomes very concerned about the domino theory. So this is the idea that if one area falls to communism, then the countries surrounding that area will also fall. So again, if communism is spreading into China and Eastern Europe, it's going to kind of spread outward from there that we have to be worried about because, again, we wanted to contain the spread of communism. Okay, so China becomes communist, and this is going to launch the U.S. and the United Nations into the Korean War, okay? North Korea, which if you look here, borders right along China, is going to become a communist country. South Korea, South Korea, on the other hand, wants to remain democratic, okay? Super important, they're going to be divided at the 38th parallel, okay? So again, using that latitude and longitude, they're going to divide Korea at the 38th parallel. When we talk about the Korean War, this is going to be the first military action ever taken by the United Nations. So remember, we talked about after World War II, after kind of the failures of the League of Nations, the United Nations is created with a military force to back it up, and we're going to see this put into action for the first time during the Korean War. Not super important, though. I will not ask you who the leaders were. But again, you see the communist leader for North Korea, and we had a democratic leader for South Korea. Alright, so when we talk about the Korean War, again, it doesn't last super long. It's only, we see active fighting for 3 years. And we can kind of basically go over it in 4 steps. I want you to follow along on the map kind of as I explain it. And I broke it down kind of into these 4 steps. Okay? North Korea, obviously, as a communist nation, wants to spread communism into South Korea. Okay? So North Korean forces cross that 38th parallel, or that dividing line between North and South Korea, to invade South Korea, which is a democratic country. The United States and the United Nations, okay, are going to support South Korea under our policy of containment. Hold on, let me get this out of your way, guys. There you go. Okay, so U.S. troops and United Nations troops are going to come in to support South Korea. Okay, so the United States was able to push North Korea back up to the 38th parallel. Okay, and we see Douglas MacArthur, who we talked about, is fighting in the Pacific in World War II. Okay, he gets a little bit bold. Okay, and he decides, oh, not only are we going to push them back up to the parallel, okay, push them back out of South Korea, let's just go ahead and invade into North Korea. Okay, he did not have permission to do this. He was not supposed to do this. He takes advantage of the situation and he invades North Korea. Now, when you look at the map, okay, he's getting very close to the Yalu River. That's a problem because the Yalu River is the border between North Korea and China. China does not like that we are pushing so close to them, also a communist country. China is going to get involved and pushes the U.S. forces back. Okay? We create the border, okay, roughly near the 38th parallel, no territory literally gained on either side, and we end the war there. So we end pretty much right where we started, with North Korea being communist and South Korea being democratic. So we create that border known as the DMZ, or the Demilitarized Zone. North remains communist, backed by China. South remains democratic, backed by the U.S. Okay, so again, not really any progress was made, but we do consider this kind of a victory for containment because South Korea does not fall to communism. Okay, so I want you to keep this in mind because later on in the unit next week when we look at the Vietnam War, They have similar kind of approaches and similar progress, but we're going to see a very different outcome in Vietnam. All right, so the next president that we're going to look at who takes over, okay, after Truman's second term, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who we talked about was a major general in World War II, he is going to become president. Okay, and just like with the Truman Doctrine, and let's review our little corny sayings and hand gestures. Remember, Truman likes to eat greasy turkey. He gives economic aid in grease and turkey. And then we talk about the Marshall. Let me go back so you can see him. Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. Okay, Marshall Plan helps in Western Europe, also giving economic aid. Okay, the Eisenhower Doctrine is going to be a little bit different. Okay, with the Eisenhower Doctrine, I think about EE. Eisenhower Doctrine is helping in the Middle East. Okay, this is going to step up. He goes beyond economic aid. Okay, and this is where it's different than the other two. He also was providing military aid. Okay, so Truman and Marshall Plan, strictly economic. With the Eisenhower Doctrine, again, the targeted area is going to be the Middle East, and he's going to step it up. So not only can they get economic aid fighting against a communist country, they also get military aid. And again, obviously, you do not need to write down the quote, but that is a quote coming from the Eisenhower Doctrine. I will not play this for you, but it was a little Ike for President ad, so one of his political campaigns in the 1950s. So we saw this word a little bit forward, this idea of brinkmanship, or going to the brink of war. Okay? Again, a lot of the times we see this idea of we kind of like are pushing the buttons of the Soviet Union. We want to push them to the brink of war because we basically want them to back down. So either you're going to man up and fight, or you're going to cave into our demands. So this kind of creates a tense relationship, even more so between the United States and the Soviet Union, because we keep kind of pushing each other to the brink of war. Are we actually willing to fight? Are we actually willing to use, nuclear weapons against each other? Or is one of us going to cave and end the war? Okay, so the idea of brinkmanship also leads to this idea of massive retaliation. So we keep threatening to go to war and threatening these, again, pushing each other's buttons and pushing to the brink of war. But we also understand that with both the Soviet Union and the United States having atomic bombs, the idea of massive retaliation. So if one country attacks, other countries are going to attack using nuclear weapons as well. And that leads to this idea of mutually assured destruction. Okay, if one of us goes down and we use atomic bombs, the other country is going to retaliate and cause mass destruction. So again, you see all the bombs backed up by both of these armies, and then on either side, we say, oh, no account to be used because the enemy might retaliate. Same on both sides. So they know they're shooting with arrows. Okay, because they know if one country uses the atomic bomb, the other country is going to retaliate. Okay, so at this point, right at the end of the Korean War, Joseph Stalin dies of a heart attack, and we have a new leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, becomes the Soviet leader. So we have a new kind of relationship that we have to build with the Soviet Union and new progress to be made. Okay, a big aspect of the Cold War. So remember, we don't ever fight the Soviet Union directly. We may fight in these proxy wars. But again, a lot of this competition is about different ideas. And then we're going to see competition between technology, weapons. We're going to talk about the space race, the arms race. All of these things that don't involve direct fighting with the Soviet Union. Okay, so during this time, we participate in the arms race. We are competing against the Soviet Union to create more powerful weapons. Okay, so post-World War II, the hydrogen bomb is going to be developed, which is hundreds times more powerful than the atomic bomb. So if you look down here at this kind of graphic, okay, this little circle right here is zoomed in here, okay, this is the bomb that we dropped at Hiroshima, okay. These are the 2 hydrogen bombs that we test. So again, that the strength and power is already dynamically more. And then this is going to be the hydrogen bomb tested by the Soviet Union. Okay, so again, when we talk about things like Brinkmanship and massive retaliation and mutually assured destruction, we knew we were messing with some very powerful weapons. Okay, we also create intercontinental ballistic missiles. Okay, which these missiles could travel thousands of miles to intended target. Okay, so this is going to become a problem if we are remotely close to any country who would want to bomb us. Okay, so again, there's kind of this fear with this technology as well. So we have the arms race, which is competing to who has the kind of the best weapons. And then in 1957, the Russians launched Sputnik. Okay, super important that you know, which is the first satellite in space. So this launches another level of competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, known as the space race. Okay, so the U.S. is going to respond to the Soviet Union launching Sputnik. We're going to increase the amount of spending in education, same thing like we see today in the trend, increasing kind of STEM classes, and we're also going to develop NASA. Okay, so we want to kind of get a leg in. We want to compete in the space race as well. At the same time this is going on, again, we're very suspicious of immigrants. This launches us into the second Red Scare. Okay, so again, anybody who was different, anybody who was an immigrant could easily be also accused of being a communist. So the U.S. government is going to create the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC, to investigate anybody suspected of being communist. Okay? This really nobody could escape it, and this reached all the way up into kind of levels of the federal government where many members of the U.S. government are accused of being communist. Okay, we also see this term kind of McCarthyism come out because a lot of people were accused without evidence. Okay, and McCarthy was one guy who literally gets up and he said, I know that our government has been infiltrated with communists. I have a whole list of people that, are in the government that are communist, and it was a blank sheet of paper. So no evidence was produced, so this gets nicknamed McCarthyism, so when you accuse someone and you don't have any evidence. Okay, so he kind of gets a bad rap for that. Could not back up his accusations. Okay, what really kind of sparked and allowed the Red Scare to continue on as long as it did was the execution of the Rosenbergs. Okay, so this couple was convicted of espionage or that spying, and they specifically are charged because they sold U.S. secrets to the Soviets about the atomic bomb. Okay, both are sentenced. It reveals down here a bigger ring of how many people were really involved, how many people kind of betrayed their country and sold out their secrets to the Soviets. Both were convicted and given the death penalty. So again, it really showed the people that there were people who were going against their country, completing espionage, and this really launched people into the Red Scare being suspicious of everyone.